An old friend just contacted me because she's getting into the craft and she's doing it in a very common way. She found an old piece of furniture and she wants to restore it and repurpose it for something else. She found I forget what the furniture's called, but basically you got two little cabinets, a little desk right here, a mirror right there, and a lot of times ladies would do their makeup in the morning, had a little chair underneath it. Well, she basically took out that middle section. The mirror was all destroyed anyways. And she's going to put those two side pieces in her closet and then make a little organization thing. And she just wanted to remove the wood finish. And it was a stained wood, so she got to get rid of the staining and apply a new stain that would match her house. She didn't want to paint it. So the first job a lot of woodworkers getting into this is kind of that kind of situation. And painting, the reason why I think it's so much popular out there is because it's easy. You know, you just scuff it up, put a little shellac for stain blocking on it, and then paint right over it. Or getting a wood finish, you know, getting it back to the bare wood and then applying either a clear finish or a stain to match the rest of the house. That takes a little bit more effort, but much more rewarding. And you know, the first step getting rid of that finish is the big problem we're talking about today. You could use all those chemical stuff out there, and a lot of people on YouTube like that one. I hate to be a snobbish, but I think a lot of people like that way because they don't have some basic skills that we're going to be talking about today. Everyone else kind of told her to, you know, buy yourself a sander and have at it, which, you know, along with a sander, you need the full hazmat suit, right? Because you are sanding chemicals that are getting in the air and you're going to be breathing it. When she contacted me and we were going down that situation, she was sending me pictures, and you know, it's kind of that situation where you just got to keep sanding because it's all splotchy. She wasn't getting fully through the finish. Got to keep going. It's a lot of effort, and it's hot outside. So I kind of told her that I'd scrape first to get rid of most of it because it's not making all that dust. And that's kind of what the experts do, and it's not a hard skill to learn. Not at all. Let me show you. But before that one, let me introduce you to an old-timey tool that's out there at garage sales, especially if you're up north and through the Rust Belt, because a lot of people have them, pass them down, and nobody really knows what to do with them, that their actual name is called a cabinet scraper. And if you're having to scrape sides of furniture, this is actually the tool built for it, a cabinet scraper. Now, the only reason I didn't mention this to her was because it does take a little bit of other tools to use. Basically, what it is we have a blade right here. It's just kind of, in this example, it's clamped right here. But you can buy Stanley versions of this at garage sales all day long. You know, a lot of times $10, $15. And if you're missing the blade, well, it's just a hunk of steel that you can put a burr on yourself. And that putting the burr on is what I'm talking about. You do have to have some sharpening tools. Either, you know, diamond stones, water stones, sandpaper and glass, something like that. And you also need a burnisher, which is a piece of metal that's a lot harder than the steel that you're sharpening so it can bend it over. This takes a little bit more skill, but if you're doing a lot of furniture restoration, this might be something you want to learn to do because it will save you hours of sanding. Basically, you set it up, you put the blade in there. It's a fairly thin blade. You have some kind of wheel that kind of bends that blade and then clamps it out there. So this blade is at a slight curve, and my workbench has a poly finish on it, a Danish oil finish, and you can see it just goes right through it in one swipe. And instead of sawdust, I make plain shavings. So if you're doing a lot of finishing, this might be the way to go. But if you're just getting started into it, this little $1, $2 card scraper is a lot more of an entry-level way into doing it. But once again, you have to sharpen it, but this is not very hard to sharpen. Now, we call these things scrapers, but that's kind of a misnomer. We're actually cutting with the tools. That's why I get these shavings instead of just sawdust. What's happening is we have our scraper blade, and instead of drawing it straight up and down, I'm going to draw it at a slight angle, maybe 10 degrees right there, okay? Now, when we push forward with this blade, it's not going to do anything until we add some kind of burr, and that's actually folding that metal over the edge to create a tiny hook. And that tiny hook kind of looks like that. So when you push it against the wood, a little shaving is going to come up right there, and it's just going to take off a little bit. You can't take off a lot with a card scraper. So it would just touch that little surface that happens to have your finish on it. Now, putting a working hook on a card scraper is really the simplest thing you could do. But like everything, you can continue to refine that hook to get better and better shavings. But for removing finish, before you start sanding, a rough hook is all you need. And to do that, just get yourself a mill file. And something like this right here I saw on Amazon for about $15, and I thought that was kind of expensive for this tool. This is a tool that you'll use for like sharpening lawnmower blades or just smoothing out any kind of metal. This would be perfect for that. And to do it, all you want to do is hold this at 90 degrees and work it back and forth a few times. Yes, I know a mill file only cuts in one direction, but I go both ways. Now this does two things. First, it straightens out a straight card scraper. So if you had any dents on in there, maybe you hit a nail at one time, you want to get rid of that one because that will show in your finish. The next thing is it puts a rough burr on the outside. Now I rounded this one over prior to this to make it as dull as possible to show you just how long it takes. Now if you aren't confident about holding it at 90 degrees, just grab a block of wood. You can rest it right there, and there you go. The only danger right here is you want to watch this top edge, because if your front hand slips, you could cut yourself or scratch yourself pretty badly. Just enough that you need a Band-Aid. If you want, you could wear a glove for this, but I just squeeze a little bit hard, and there we go. And you want to do it until you can put your hand over it, and you will feel that burr. Trust me, you will notice it. And to make this thing work, all I'm going to do is you'll notice I'm going to flex it a little bit. Now they make card scrapers in different thicknesses. I personally like a fairly thick card scraper because it resists a little bit more. The more you flex it, the more aggressive it's going to cut because it's only going to be touching a little bit of section at a time. If you don't flex it that much, it's going to take a wider shaving, which is a flatter shaving. And with this tool, you don't have to worry about grain direction, like in a hand plane. You can go across grain, with grain, any way you want. And when it dulls, just come back and sharpen it back up. You can do the same thing with a round scraper. Just put a burr on it. Got a burr right there, and I can get into corners for like molding and stuff like that. Now this is going to create a noticeable groove right there. But there's no reason you can't take these little things, which are really cheap, take some steel nips and cut whatever shape you want if you need to get into like a groove or something like that in your furniture to get rid of the muck and the finish that's inside that. Now for those of y'all that do want to take this a little bit farther, well, here's how you can get an even better edge. And this is what I was talking about earlier, where people can go way far down a rabbit hole refining the edge. You will notice light reflecting off of it. This has just come off of my mill file. So that is what I would call a rough edge. Now I'm going to take something called a burnisher. Now this is a metal that is much harder than the steel that you're using. And then if you notice, I'm going to remove that burr. Right now, that burr is kind of curving over like that. So I'm going to take it off. Notice I'm going away with this burnisher. I folded it over. And if you've ever sharpened your kitchen knives, you know that burr that you kind of push back and forth with your steel. Well, that's kind of what we're doing right here. So I've now folded that burr over. So now it is kind of coming over like this right now. Now I'm going to take that and I'm going to start at 90 degrees and I'm going to smush that burr down. So what I've now done is taken that curve and I've smushed them down, and notice my knuckles come out on either side when I do that one. That's what happened with the metal. And then you could take it And notice every few strokes I just kind of fold it over a little bit further. See the angle I have right now? Can you see that? See, it's not straight up and down. That way you can control how much that burr is curved, whereas just straight off the mill file you can't. Plus the fact, because we smashed and folded and moved that burr around, it is now smooth and not serrated like it comes off of with a card scraper. And what kind of results can you get with a finer one? Well, much easier to work, and it will last you longer. So there you go. How much finish can you take off like that versus sandpaper? So 20 bucks in equipment, or maybe a little bit more if you want to grab yourself a burnisher, and you can have a lifetime of sandpaper savings. Think about how much you could save not having to buy a bunch of those coarser grits that you would use to take off the finish. Hope this helped a few of y'all out. And hey, check out the rest of my channel, including I have a whole prerequisite course for those of y'all that are just getting into woodworking, maybe haven't bought your tools, but you want to gather a lot of knowledge to begin with before you dive in deep. And then I have a Start Woodworking series, all free, available here on YouTube. And I want you to remember, it's always worth the effort to learn, create new things, even if it's just a little bit of an edge, and share it with others. Y'all be safe and have fun.